If you are unaware, there are big changes coming to the Batman line. The group editor is out, the regular editor is out, and we have a new group editor stepping in, and it just has me wondering, what does it actually take to get fired from DC Comics? Now you can actually get promoted while still doing Allan Scott the Green Lantern. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but that is basically what's going on right now. Chip Zdarsky posting his new Substack newsletter. As always, I'm hard at work. This week, I'm putting the finishing touches on the script for Batman 148, and I think I'm going to just leave this typo as is for my new glorious editor, Katie Kubert. Katie Kubert is the daughter of comic book legend Joe Kubert and niece of both Adam Kubert and Andy Kubert. After starting at DC and moving on to Marvel Comics, Kubert returned to DC Comics and was promoted to group editor of Global Publishing Innovation, one of the moving forces behind DC's Webtoon program. Now, I guess there's a pretty decent chance that the Webtoon stuff is really what got her promoted. I guess the Batman family, Bruce Wayne family Webtoon is actually quite successful. But she's also had a lot of stinkerooskies in here, and it does seem like Katie Kubert is probably a very nice person. You don't see her out there attacking fans or talking down to them or anything, but you also don't see her doing a really great job either. And she's had a lot of different opportunities at DC Comics with really big time characters, specifically Batman, the Justice League, Harley Quinn, and some other high profile characters. And she has had a few highs, but has had a ton of lows. Obviously, the really big one I'm thinking about now, because I read Allan Scott, the Green Lantern #4 today, which once again retcons not only Green Lantern lore, but actually retcons the stuff that Jeff Johns literally just introduced in the Justice Society of America reboot that he did, within the last 18 months or whatever. I guess if you're Tim Sheridan, you just have carte blanche to break everything because Katie Kubert is your group editor, and it doesn't really matter if the book is good. It doesn't matter if it sells. If you are not aware of what's been going on with Allan Scott, the Green Lantern, let's talk about some of the changes that happened under Katie Kubert. In Allan Scott, the Green Lantern #1, it reveals that not only is Allan Scott blackmailed into joining the JSA, but that he never wanted to join the superhero team. J. Edgar Hoover also seems to be blackmailing Allan Scott into a sexual relationship in that comic book. In Allan Scott, the Green Lantern #2, following his superiors finding out that he's gay, Allan Scott is forced to check himself into Arkham Asylum for conversion therapy. In Arkham, Allan Scott's roommate Billy, a trans woman, gives Allan the Green Railroad Lantern, thus becoming the origin of Allan Scott becoming Green Lantern. In issue #3, Allan Scott is picking up male prostitutes at the docks. It's also heavily insinuated Allan Scott frequents many different prostitutes on the docks, basically on a daily basis in Allan Scott, the Green Lantern #3. And like I said, issue #4 doesn't get any better. And obviously, those are just the highlights of the stuff that people are talking about in that particular series, which is just an abomination. It's one of the worst things I've ever read. And it's not just all the retconning going on in Allan Scott, the Green Lantern, which is absolutely terrible on the part of Tim Sheridan, the writer, and obviously Katie Kubert, the group editor over the book, because there is a lot of that. Not only is it retconning Allan Scott, Green Lantern lore, but it's also retconning JSA lore and all kinds of stuff. And this week, even Crimson Lantern lore. But just the way that the book is structured and the way that it reads makes no sense whatsoever. Like, nothing about the book paces correctly. It's not a smooth read. It actually doesn't go from one issue to the next issue to the next issue as you're telling this one complete, comprehensive, flowing story through 6 issues. It's just start and stop because it's not really supposed to entertain, which feels like should be within the purview of Katie Kubert as the group editor to make sure, at the bare minimum, the comic book is entertaining rather than just being trans and gay trauma porn, which is basically what Allan Scott, the Green Lantern #1. I think in this week's issue, it's retconned that the way that Allan Scott actually goes through walls, which he's been able to move through walls basically since the very beginning, he actually uses time travel or something stupid like that. So now we're fixing even more things that weren't broken from the get-go under the purview, the leadership of Katie Kubert as the group editor in charge of this particular series of books. And she has been doing a lot of the JSA stuff, which I personally found disappointing. Although I do think the Jay Garrick and Wesley Dodd series as of late have been particularly good. When you're the leader responsible for one of the most embarrassing comic books DC has put out in the last 5 years, and that's absolutely saying something because DC Comics embarrassed themselves basically on a monthly or weekly basis for the last 5 years. This is at the top of the heap as far as bad comic books that DC Comics have produced. How do you get this promotion? How do you get to be the person in charge of Batman? I know that Katie Kubert has edited a lot of Batman material and Batman associated characters, but she's never been really successful. And the most notable things that she's done, for the most part, have been absolute black eyes on the face of DC Comics and their reputation. Let's talk about some of the hits, the greatest hits from Katie Kubert. Harley Quinn, the animated series, the series that made T. Franklin a household name for all the wrong reasons. Multiversity, Harley screws up the DCU. Multiversity Teen Justice, do you remember that series from Danny Lore? The Blue Beetle stuff from Josh Trujillo that doesn't sell anything. It's not even ranked anymore. She also did a bunch of the New Age of Heroes stuff, but none of the good stuff. Didn't do Damage, didn't do Silencer, didn't do the Terrifics. It was like the unexpected and all those New Age of Heroes books that bombed and were canceled within 3 or 4 issues. She was one of the main editors on Represent, that digital series that didn't last very long. That was really embarrassing. She was also one of the editors on Batman Fortnite, which did have one cool issue when you had Batman fight Snake Eyes, but otherwise was pretty much an enormous mess. Now, there have been a couple of high points, I guess, recently. Justice League Last Ride was actually pretty decent. Flashpoint Beyond, pretty decent. Jay Garrick the Flash, I like that one. A lot of people do like Stargirl, The Lost Children. And I would say the high point of her career probably is Batman Who Laughs from Scott Snyder and Jock. But when you look at the breadth of work from Katie Kubert at DC Comics, it certainly doesn't scream ever, this person should be a group editor at all. And it certainly doesn't say this is the person that should be responsible for anything Batman related. What's one of the things that's really killing Batman right now? First of all, Batman isn't very good. Detective Comics is absolutely worse. But a lot of the adjacent titles just are terrible. You think about, just like on the top of your mind, Catwoman and Harley Quinn. Tini Howard is basically destroying both of those properties at the exact same time. There's no way Katie Kubert is going to go out there and replace Tini Howard on these titles when they both need a new creative voice on them. Why not? Well, because she hired fucking Tim Sheridan for the Allan Scott book. She hired T. Franklin for the Harley Quinn Eat, Bang, Kill tour and all the animated series stuff. She hires worse writers and keeps them on titles for long periods of time. And as bad as I think Tini Howard is as a writer, T. Franklin and Tim Sheridan are actually worse. You know, when you think about the Harley Quinn animated series stuff, just being the editor responsible for that mess and all the shit that T. Franklin put out there, I mean, that right there was a fireable offense in and of itself. And I understand that DC Comics have recently, well, I guess it's not all that recent anymore, but within the last 4 or 5 years, gutted their editorial staff. And they did have a couple of departures within the last few months that we'll talk about here in a few minutes. But there has to be a higher standard of excellence, a higher standard of quality than Katie Kubert. Katie Kubert is now the group editor for Batman, the editor behind Allan Scott, the Green Lantern, the editor behind Harley Quinn Eat, Bang, Kill tour, the editor behind Multiversity Teen Justice, the editor that keeps putting Josh Trujillo on Blue Beetle books when you have a Blue Beetle movie coming out. And she really does seem to have a terrible taste in creative people. She has terrible taste on what's going to work with the readers. And she seems to not have the ability to tell creators, no, that's a bad idea. Let's not put Billy the trans guy into the Green Lantern lore. Let's not put peg leg Beyonce into Harley Quinn lore. Yet time and time again, these terrible decisions are greenlit by Katie Kubert. Now, the reason Katie is getting promoted isn't because she did a good job. I think we've established that, but there was an opening. They needed a new Batman group editor, and obviously Katie is sliding in for that. Batman group editor and executive editor at DC Comics, Ben Abernathy, quit DC Comics recently. Ben Abernathy broke into comics as an assistant editor at Dark Horse Comics in Portland in 1998 before moving on to Wildstorm in DC, and he's basically worked all over the comic book industry, and it sounds like he's going to be finding a home over at Skybound, I believe. Abernathy was promoted to Batman group editor in 2019, which began with his hiring of James Tynion and Jorge Jimenez to take over from Tom King. As a result, he was promoted to executive editor in late 2021. Jessica Chedd, who also edited many Batman-related comics, also left DC Comics recently. So there certainly are some spots to fill, and Ben Abernathy as the group editor of Batman, you know, in theory, is a huge loss. You know, he has had a lot of great work in the past, but Batman has pretty much sucked since the first story arc of Chip Zdarsky's run started. I didn't think James Tynion's run was very good. I think Ram V's Detective Comics run is basically unbearable. As I mentioned, Tini Howard on Harley Quinn and Catwoman. Before that, you had Stephanie Phillips on Harley Quinn. So it's not like Ben Abernathy was absolutely blowing the world up. And he was in the greatest position in the history of Batman. to hire the writer that was going to replace Tom King on Batman. It didn't matter who it was. They were going to be successful. You probably could have put T. Franklin on that book and everyone would have said, it's amazing. And luckily for James Tynion, they ended up choosing him. So DC Comics certainly set up Ben Abernathy for success as the Batman group editor, and he's moving on. And they have to find somebody, but my goodness, is there nobody out there that has a track record of success, that has an idea of what a good Batman story is, that has the balls to actually tell a writer as incompetent as Tim Sheridan no, to tell a writer as completely unprofessional and stupid as T. Franklin no? Because we know that Katie Kubert isn't going to do that, and she does have a track record of hiring very bad creators for somewhat important titles. So I don't know what you have to do to get fired at DC Comics. I'm not calling for Katie Kubert to get fired. I'm just saying, if you look at Harley Quinn Eat, Bang, Kill Tour, you could have fired her right there. If you look at Allan Scott, the Green Lantern, you could have fired this person right there, but now they're being promoted to being in charge of Batman, the most important group editor job, not just at DC Comics, but all of American comic books. And I don't think this is going to end well, because I don't think Katie Kubert has a track record of success. And I can look at a lot of the decisions Katie has made in the past and say, this person, probably the wrong fit for the job there. If you want more comic book conversations, reviews, geek culture content, I do want to invite you to go over to the Patreon. 8 hours of new exclusive content on Patreon every single week, featuring some of your favorite guests on Thinking Critical, including Doc, Aaron Sparrow, Jim from Weird Science, and of course myself. I do the majority of it as well. If you haven't seen that, definitely check it out. There's a link in the video description, and I do think you're going to find some stuff there that you've been looking for.